Today you will be learning to solve multi-step inequalities, lesson 3.4. These 5 steps should look very familiar to you from solving multi-step equations. Okay, your first step, if there are any parentheses, you have to distribute. Okay, then we look for any like terms, and remember like terms have to be on the same side of that equation. Okay, or inequality, I guess I should say. Okay. Then we look if there's a variable on both sides. If there is, we move that smaller variable term. And again, it doesn't really matter which one we move. Just as we move the smaller one, we're less likely to end up with that negative. Okay? Then we add or subtract to get rid of the constant. And last but not least, we multiply or divide to isolate our variable. Okay? Key part down here, okay? If you multiply or divide by a negative, you need to remember to switch your symbol, okay? That symbol needs to change to the opposite direction because we're changing that inequality by a negative number, an opposite number. So let's look at some of these, okay? So my goal is still to isolate the variable. There's no parentheses, don't have any like terms. Here's my variable term, I want to get it by itself. So the first thing I need to do is get rid of that constant, that plus 9. So I'm going to subtract 9 on both sides. Or whatever I do to one side, I need to do to the other. Okay. So these 9's on the left cancel. Okay. 2x over here. Symbol's going to for now stay the same. Okay. And 25 minus 9 is 16. X is being multiplied by 2. So to undo that, I divide both sides by 2. Okay, that division is positive, so my symbol is going to stay the same, and I have x is less than 8. Okay, remember to graph. Okay, if I have 8, that number goes in the middle of my number line. You should at least put one value on both of your other sides, so one bigger and one smaller. Okay, when I graph that, okay, it's just less than, so my symbol or my circle is open, and less than is going to the left, okay? 7 is less than 8, so I shade that part of my number line, and I again make sure that I can tell that your shading is on the less than side, all the way through that arrow, okay? Next one, okay? Right now, x is being divided by a negative 3, okay? I need to get that term by itself first. So I need to get rid of minus 9, so I'm going to add 9. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. Okay. Leaving me with x over negative 3. Symbol still less than, and negative 7 plus 9 is 2. Now in order to get x by itself, I need to multiply both sides by negative 3. Okay, since what I'm multiplying both sides is negative, okay, we need to remember to change my sign. So these 3's cancel, and I have x. Again, sign changes from less than to greater than, and I get x is greater than negative 6. Okay. I want to practice my graphing. Okay. Make sure you check your directions. If they say to graph, you need to graph. Make sure you watch when you make a negative number line. Negative 5's there, or negative 6 is in the middle. Negative 5 is bigger than that, and negative 7 is less than that. Okay, so again, it's not or equal to, so it's an open circle. And I just said negative 5 was bigger than that, and I want the numbers greater than that, so we are going to the right. Making sure that shaded part of my number line is nice and dark. Okay, make sure you always check your directions if they want your solution graphed or not. Okay, so those were 2 steps. Let's look at some other ones, okay? 15 is less than or equal to 5 minus 2 times the quantity of 4m plus 7, okay? First step I see, there's parentheses, so I need to distribute. I'm going to distribute what's right inside those parentheses, which is negative 2. So I'm going to share that to both parts of my parentheses. And I have 15 is less than or equal to 5. And then negative 2 times 4m is negative 8m. Negative 2 times 7 is negative 14. Okay, so I distributed to get rid of my parentheses. Step 2, I need to look for like terms. Okay, on this here right side, I have a constant of 5 and a constant of negative 14. Since they're on the same side, I can combine those. So we have 15 still, and then I have negative 8m, right? And 5 minus 14 is a negative 9. Okay, so my goal is to get this 8m, negative 8m by itself. So I need to get rid of minus 9 by adding 9. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. Okay, so now I have 24. Okay, I only added, so my symbol is still less than or equal to negative 8m. In order to get m by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 8. Okay, and now since that division, what I divided by was negative, my sign is going to switch directions. Okay, because what I multiplied by was negative. So 24 divided by negative 8 is negative 3. It was less than or equal to, becomes greater than or equal to, and I have left m over here. Okay. Now, not that you have to, but I like to have my variable written first, so I'm going to change this to be m. It's pointing towards m, so I'm going to point towards m here when I rewrite that. Okay, so m is less than or equal to negative 3. Okay, just now to practice one that's graphing with that greater than or equal to sign. Okay, negative 3 is in the middle, negative 2 is the greater than number, and negative 4 is the less than number. Since it's or equal to, this time my circle is shaded, and less than is that negative 4 part of my number line. Okay, again, making sure my shading is nice and dark on my shaded half of the number line. Okay. Next one, this time I don't have any parentheses, so I don't need to distribute, but what I do notice is I have a 3b on the left and a negative 2b on the right. Okay. So I cannot solve an equation or an inequality when there's two variables, so I need to move that smaller one. Negative 2 is smaller than 3, so I'm going to add 2b to both sides, leaving me with 5b plus 12. Symbol is still greater than, didn't change anything, I just did addition, 27. So my goal is to get 5b by itself. Need to get rid of that constant of plus 12, so I'm minus 12 on both sides. Again, that's just subtraction, so I'm not worrying about my sign. It stays like it is. So I have 5b is greater than 25. Not 25, then 15. Okay, 7 minus 2 is 5. 2 minus 1 is 1. Okay. Now to get b by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by 5. Since what I divided by is positive, b is going to remain greater than 3. All right. Now, just like equations, multi-step inequalities can have special solutions. We end up with that true or false statement. When we end up with a false statement, we get a no solution. When we get infinitely many, okay, that means it can't be all real numbers, we end up with a true statement. Okay, so we're going to go through and we're going to draw lines from these. Okay, so the first one, 4 is greater than 8, which is not true, so that is a no solution. Okay, if I ended up with 6 is greater than 2, that's a true statement, so that would be infinitely many. Okay. Negative 8 is less than 7, a true statement, again, so it's infinitely many. Remember, these happen when your variable terms cancel on both sides. Okay. 9 is less than negative 12, that's a false statement, so that would be no solution. 3 is greater than 3 is also a false statement or equal to, but since my symbol is greater than, it has to be false. Okay, 8 is less than or equal to 9 is a true statement. 8 is less than 9. Okay, Negative 10 is greater than or equal to 0 is a false statement, so that goes up here to our no solution box, right? And negative 1 is greater than or equal to negative 1. Since it says or equal to, that is a true statement, okay? So all these ones that point to that infinitely many that ended up with that true statement, right? These are infinitely many solutions, okay? These other ones that are false, they are not possible to solve. They're no solution inequalities, okay? So let's look at a couple like those, okay? So when I look at this first inequality, I have 9 plus 5n is less than or equal to 5n minus 1, okay? There's no parentheses, there's no like terms, but I have variables on separate sides, okay? Both those variables are the same, so I really don't need to do any work, but if the work helps you, do it, okay? So I need to get rid of a 5n. Whatever I do on one side, I do to the other. And since they were both positive, what that does is cancels out both of those 5n's. And then left with 9 is less than or equal to negative 1. Okay? 9 is not less than negative 1, so this is a false statement. So this inequality has no solution. The second one, my first step, I have parentheses, so I need to distribute. Okay? Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. Negative 2 times a negative x is a positive 2x. And I have greater than 2x minus 6. Okay. So I have a variable term over here, variable term over here. Okay. So they're both the same, so you might be able to notice. If not, you can subtract your 2x on both sides, getting me negative 6 is greater than negative 6, which even though they're the same, since it doesn't have that or equal to, this is a false statement, and our answer would be no solution. Okay. The only time it would be infinitely many then is when you were to get a true statement. So if this one was or equal to, this one on the right, then it would be in all real numbers inequality. Word problems for multi-step. Again, use your marking the text strategies. So it says you're planning to participate in the charity walk. You want to raise at least $500, so that's our total we want. And if it's at least 500, that means we want more than that if possible. So that means we want our answer to be greater than or equal to that 500. Again, I always put the total at the end of my problem, okay? And then it says you already have $175 by asking people to pledge $25 each, okay? How many more $25 pledges do you need, okay? So it told us they already have $175, so that's a constant, okay? They're gonna get some more $25 pledges, and that's $25 each, okay? So that 25, since it's each, goes with my variable, and n is representing the number of pledges. Okay. So when I solve this, my goal is to get n by itself. So I need to subtract 175 on both sides. Leaving me with 25n. 25n. And when I take 500 minus 175, I get 325. Okay. This is still greater than or equal to, I just did addition or subtraction. And to get n by itself, so I divide both sides by 25. Okay. And I have n is greater than or equal to 13. Okay, so if his goal is to raise at least $500, he needs to get 13 or more pledges. 13 or more $25 pledges. Okay. Some other ways you could word that would be at least 13 more pledges. Okay. Either one of those two answers would be acceptable. And one more for today. Okay. You want to make a rectangular banner that is 18 feet long. Okay. 18 feet long. And we know they want it to be a rectangle. They tell us they have 48 feet for the trim. And if you think about trim, it goes all the way around the banner. Okay, so they're telling me I have a rectangle. Okay. They want it to be 18 feet long. Okay. And the distance all the way around, so if I start at a corner and I go all the way around, okay, they want to total 48 feet at the most. Okay, and when you're going around something, that means we're talking about perimeter. Okay, now there's a formula for perimeter of a rectangle. It's P equals 2L plus 2W. L is representing the length, W is representing the width. Okay, so for this problem, we know that our perimeter, the most it can be is 48 feet. So my perimeter has to be smaller than that. And I always put my total on the right side. So my perimeter has to be smaller than or equal to 48. Okay, so I'm switching these two sides of my equation around. Okay, 2L, okay, we know our length is 18 feet. Okay, we are looking for the possible width, so that width stays a W. Okay, so in order to solve this equation, my first step is take 2 times 18, which I get 36, okay, plus 2W, has to be less than or equal to 48. Goal is to get 2W by itself, so I'm going to subtract 36 on both sides. Again, that's just subtraction. Okay, so that cancels, and I have 2W is less than or equal to 12. I wanted to get W by itself, so I divide both sides by 2, and W has to be less than or equal to 6. Okay, so for my answer, again, it's a word problem. We don't want to say less than or equal to 6. We want to say something like at most 6 feet. Okay, so 6 feet or less would be a possible other option. Okay, remember word problems, you need to write out your answer. Okay. So solving multi-step inequalities. Same steps as multi-step equations. First, distribute to get rid of any parentheses. Combine any like terms that are on the same side. If there's variables on both sides, move the smaller one, add or subtract to get rid of the constant, and then multiply or divide to isolate the variable.